I never thought I'd find myself standing outside the house I grew up in, rejected on a holiday, no less. There I was, holding a bottle of expensive wine in one hand and a basket of homemade chocolate eggs in the other, gifts I knew my mother would have loved a few years ago. But not today. Today, it was as if I was a stranger, unwanted and uninvited. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice shaky as I stood at the door, trying to keep my composure. But no, this wasn't a joke. It wasn't even a misunderstanding. "No, Victor, today isn't the time. The family's having a good time," my mother said, her voice distant, her eyes not meeting mine. I could hear laughter inside, familiar voices, but none of them were mine. My half-brother, Edward, had taken control of this house, and with it, he had taken control of my mother's attention too. I had never been the center of her world, but today, it was painfully obvious. "Why don't you come back later?" she added, almost pleading. But the truth was clear. If I stayed, it would disrupt Edward's world, and he was her priority now. It had always been that way. I was just the backup, the one who paid the bills to keep the house running, and they treated me like a walking wallet, nothing more. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Well, then have a peaceful Easter," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Inside, I was boiling with frustration, but I swallowed it down. It was easier to leave than fight for a place I no longer had. But as I turned to walk away, I knew this time would be different. This time, I would not let them have control over me anymore. As I pulled out my phone and opened the payment app, my hands were steady, but my heart was racing. The bills I'd been silently paying for years, electricity, water, Wi-Fi, the streaming services, it all stopped today. I tapped cancel payment, one by one. The lights in the house flickered, and I heard shouting from inside. "What the hell? The Wi-Fi's down!" Edward's voice cut through the air like a sharp knife. But I didn't look back. I didn't even care. I was done. I didn't need to be there to see their reactions. The chaos would speak louder than any words. I had just pulled the plug, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of relief. As I drove away, the sinking sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but there was no warmth in the air for me. I didn't feel sad, though. For the first time, I felt free. I wasn't the one running around trying to make everyone happy. I wasn't the one holding everything together while they tore me apart. I had finally chosen myself, and it was a strange kind of liberation, but the silence behind me told me everything I needed to know. No one called. No one ran after me. I could still hear the clinking of glasses in my head, Edward's triumphant laugh ringing through my ears as he basked in the attention he had always craved. And then I heard it, the screech of tires as Edward's white SUV sped down the driveway, blocking the road in front of me. I sighed, pressing the brakes and rolling down the window. Edward stood there, hands on his hips, a furious expression on his face. He looked like a child who had just had his favorite toy taken away. "You can't just walk away like that," he shouted, his voice dripping with anger. "You're causing chaos. You're being childish." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to him. I just stared at him, the corner of my mouth twitching into a faint smile. He was right. I wasn't being childish. I was simply done. Done being the one who sacrificed everything, who paid for their lives while they treated me like a nuisance. Done with playing a role that I had never wanted to play. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the payment app again. "You think I'm throwing a tantrum?" I said calmly, looking him in the eye. "No, Edward, I'm just tired. I'm tired of always being the background character in this family drama. I'm tired of being the one who gets nothing in return." With a few more taps, I canceled everything. The last streaming service I paid for, the family plan on their phones, the auto renewals for the subscriptions they barely used. And when I looked up, there it was, the realization in Edward's eyes. He didn't say anything. The light flickered behind him, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind and the unsettling silence that had fallen over the whole situation. As I drove off, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. I wasn't angry. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was just done. And I knew they'd feel it. All of them. They'd feel the absence, the lack of control they once had over me. The world I had been keeping afloat for them was now sinking, and they had no idea what to do without me. I didn't feel guilty, not even for a second. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The drive from Santa Barbara to my apartment felt like a blur. I wasn't rushing to get home. There was no urgency, no tightness in my chest that I had gotten so used to in the past. The weight of the years I spent holding my family together, paying their bills, covering for their failures, was finally starting to lift. It was as if I could breathe again. The absence of their voices in my life was louder than any argument or drama. There was no guilt, no pressure to explain myself. It was just me, alone, and that was exactly what I needed. When I finally pulled into my parking lot, I parked the car without a second thought. I didn't even bother to take the wine bottle or the chocolate eggs with me. They were for people who still wanted to pretend like I was part of their world. I had no part in it anymore. As I locked the car and walked towards my apartment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Kelly, my cousin Ben's wife, someone who had always kept her distance from the family but had a kind heart. She had witnessed everything from the corner of the kitchen, the silent rejection, the way my mother had looked at me like I was an intruder in my own home. I saw everything today. Thank you. You did what none of us had the courage to do. I hope you're okay. I stared at the message for a long time before I typed back. I'm better than I've been in years. I finally realized that silence isn't the end. It's just the beginning. I didn't need a lot of validation. The text, though, it was a reminder that not everyone saw me as the walking ATM. Not everyone in my family had bought into the narrative that I was just here to serve their needs without ever being seen. Kelly understood. She always had. I entered my apartment, the small, quiet space I had carved out for myself after years of being a silent player in the background of my family's drama. The moment I closed the door behind me, I felt the finality of it. The chaos, the manipulation, the emotional drain, all of it was outside. This was my space, and I had made it my own. No more feeling guilty for not being there when they needed me. No more pretending I was okay with being invisible while everyone else took what they wanted from me. I took a deep breath, letting the stillness fill me. I wasn't here to wallow in self-pity. I wasn't here to feel sorry for myself. I had spent far too long doing that. This was about me, taking back the power I had unknowingly given away for so many years. I went straight to the kitchen and opened the fridge. I didn't feel like wine. I needed something else, something more satisfying, something that made me feel like I had finally closed the door on the old me, the one who had quietly played the role of the obedient daughter. I grabbed the ingredients for a quick pasta, something simple but comforting. The act of cooking, alone, felt like a small but significant rebellion against the years I had spent trying to make everyone else happy while neglecting myself. While the pasta boiled, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mom. I almost didn't open the message. I had seen her eyes earlier, when I left. The way she had reached for me as I turned away, like she was about to stop me, but then stopped herself. I knew what was coming. I had expected it. And yet, when I saw her name pop up on my screen, I hesitated. Victor, where are you? Your sister is upset and the family is falling apart without you. Please come back. It's not the same without you. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar pang of guilt. But this time, I let it pass through me without letting it take hold. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going back. Not this time. I wasn't going to play the role of the daughter who always came running when they called. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I wasn't their savior anymore. The pasta was done, and as I ate it quietly at the table, I reflected on everything that had led to this point. The years of financial support, the endless apologies, the sacrifices I made without ever asking for anything in return. All of it had brought me to this moment, where I had finally learned to choose myself over the family that had taken so much from me. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking towards something better, toward my own life, one that wasn't centered around their needs and demands. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call from Edward. I knew what it was going to be about. I didn't pick up. Instead, I let it ring, letting it serve as another reminder of the control I had once handed over so freely. They could call, they could beg, but nothing was going to change. I wasn't going back to being the person they expected me to be. I was finally free. I finished my dinner, and as I cleaned up, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had been holding on to so much anger, so much frustration, for so long, but now it was like I could finally let it all go. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I wasn't a background character in their lives. I was the main character in my own. As I washed the last of the dishes, I glanced over at the guitar that had been sitting in the corner of the room for months. I had bought it on a whim, thinking it might be something to do when I was finally done with everything. I had never found the time to play, but tonight I felt the pull. I walked over, picked it up, and strummed a few notes. It was awkward, my fingers clumsy on the strings, but the sound was soothing. It felt like something new, something that was just mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about anyone else. I wasn't waiting for someone to apologize, to make things right. I wasn't expecting anything from my family. I was simply existing. And that, for once, felt like enough. The next day, I didn't check my phone. I didn't look at my messages or listen to the voicemail that Edward had left. I had no desire to hear it. Instead, I signed up for a photography class at the community center. I wanted to learn something new, something that was just for me. For the first time, I wasn't doing it for anyone else. It was just me, reclaiming pieces of myself that had been lost for so long. And when I sat in that class, holding a camera for the first time in years, I realized something. I wasn't just learning a new skill. I was learning to see the world from a new perspective, one that didn't revolve around family expectations or sacrifices made in silence. It was about seeing myself finally for who I was, not as the daughter who paid the bills, not as the sister who was always left out, but as Victor, a man who had the right to live his life on his terms. And that was a lesson I would carry with me forever. I spent the next few weeks in a kind of calm that I hadn't known in years. I had settled into a routine that didn't revolve around my family's demands. I took long walks, started reading books I'd always meant to get around to, and found solace in the little things. I even started playing the guitar more often. Every note I played felt like a new beginning, a new life that I had finally claimed for myself. But, as it often goes, the calm didn't last forever. The silence was broken one afternoon when I got a call from my mother. I hadn't spoken to her in over a week, and part of me had hoped that the distance between us would be permanent. But when I saw her name on the screen, a familiar sense of dread settled in my chest. I wasn't ready to talk to her, but I answered anyway. "Victor," she said, her voice shaky. I could tell she had been crying, and despite everything that had happened, a part of me felt a twinge of guilt. "Where are you? Please, come home. Edward is beside himself. He's angry. I don't know how to fix this." I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed in my mind suddenly feeling inadequate. "Mom, I'm not coming back. Not for this, not ever again." The finality of my own words surprised me, but it was true. There was nothing left for me to go back to. I had learned that lesson the hard way. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "You're all we have left. Edward needs you." I laughed, though it was hollow. "Edward needs me? I've been there for years, paying bills, cleaning up messes, holding this family together, while he got everything he wanted. But not anymore. I'm done, Mom. I'm done being the one who always gives, without ever getting anything in return." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Please, don't leave me, Victor. We're family. We're supposed to stick together. The words were like a knife, twisting in my gut. Family. The word that had been used so many times to justify my sacrifice. The word that had been used to guilt me into giving, even when I had nothing left to give. I had spent my whole life trying to be the perfect son, the one who did everything right, the one who never asked for anything. But all I had gotten in return was empty promises and emotional neglect. I've been sticking around for years, Mom, I said, my voice colder now. I've been the one who's always been there, and it's never been enough. It's time for me to choose myself. For once. Another long pause stretched between us. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to come up with something, anything, that would make me come back. But this time, I wasn't budging. Victor, I'm sorry, she finally said, and it was the first time in a long time that I felt like she was being honest. I know I've asked too much of you, but I don't know what to do without you. I don't know how to fix this. I let out a breath. You don't need to fix anything, Mom. You just need to let me go. I hung up before she could say anything else. I wasn't interested in more apologies or more empty promises. This was the end, the real end. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I took my life back. But it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days preparing for what was inevitably coming. Edward's fury. I wasn't going to sit idly by and wait for him to make his next move. No, this time, I was going to be the one in control. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, going over some work, I heard a knock at the door. My heart sank. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Edward stood there, looking furious, his jaw clenched tight. You really think you can just cut us off and walk away? He spat. You think you can just leave and not have to face the consequences? I didn't flinch. I faced enough consequences for a lifetime, Edward. It's your turn now. He stepped inside without waiting for me to invite him. You think you're the only one who's been suffering? He demanded. I've been stuck here, having to put up with Mom and all of her crap while you just sit there and let her get away with it. You're no better than she is. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I stayed calm. I'm not like you, Edward. I don't expect people to carry my weight from me. And I don't manipulate others to get what I want. I'm done being the one who cleans up everyone's mess. This family is a mess, and I'm not going to be part of it anymore. His face twisted with anger. You think you can just walk away from us and everything will be fine? You think you can just abandon your family when we need you the most? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. No, Edward, I'm not abandoning you. I'm freeing myself. I'm done being your backup plan. You're on your own now. Edward's eyes flickered with something like fear, but it was too late for him to feel that. He had crossed too many lines, pushed me too far. Now, the consequences were his to deal with. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I turned my back on him, sitting back down at my desk, as if he wasn't even there. And for the first time, I felt no guilt, no second guessing. I was at peace with the decision I had made. As I looked out the window, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Edward was angry. My mother was probably heartbroken, but I had done something I had never done before. I had put myself first. I had walked away from the toxic relationships that had drained me for so long. And as I sat there, the phone buzzing on the desk, I realized something. I didn't need them. I had never needed them. I was finally free. That night, I went to bed without the familiar anxiety that had plagued me for years. No more worrying about what would happen next. No more waiting for the phone to ring with another demand. I was done. I had chosen myself. And that was the greatest decision I'd ever made. For the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. And in the morning, I woke up ready to live my life on my terms. The days that followed were a blur of peace and quiet. The kind of quiet that I had long forgotten. A silence that no longer felt like abandonment but like freedom. I didn't look back at the chaos I had left behind. Instead, I focused on building something new, something for myself. I spent my time working, learning to play the guitar better, exploring photography, and discovering the simple joys of living without the weight of my family's expectations. But life, as it often does, has a way of bringing things to a head when you least expect it. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had just returned from a long walk by the beach, the salty air still lingering in my lungs when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Kelly. "Victor, I need to talk to you. I just heard something about your mom. She's been calling around, and she's really upset. I think you should know." I stared at the message, feeling a twinge of guilt, but I quickly pushed it away. I wasn't responsible for their mess anymore, but Kelly had been there for me in ways my family never was, and I couldn't ignore her message. I called her back, the phone ringing a little longer than I expected. "Hey, Kelly," I said, trying to sound casual. "Victor." Her voice was steady but filled with concern. "I know you're not talking to your mom right now, but she's really struggling. I think she's finally realizing what you've been doing for all these years, and it's hitting her hard." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions rise up within me. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, to let her off the hook and go back to being the good son. But the other part of me, the part that had endured years of being ignored, manipulated, and used, wasn't ready to go back to that life. "Is she reaching out to you?" I asked, trying to mask the bitterness in my voice. "She's been calling me, asking if I've seen you, trying to figure out what happened. She's not handling this well, Victor," Kelly said, her tone softening. "She doesn't want to lose you." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the calm ocean view in front of me. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the tug of old memories, of family dinners, holidays, the way my mother used to smile when I brought her little surprises, the way I had tried so hard to be the perfect son. But that version of me was gone. That version of my mother, the one who truly cared about me, was gone too. "Maybe it's too late for that," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Maybe she only sees me as someone who's useful, Kelly. I don't think she ever really saw me. Not for who I am." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Victor, you don't have to do this alone. I know your mom's not perfect, but this isn't easy for her either. I'm just saying, don't close that door completely." I wasn't ready to let go of my anger. Not yet. But Kelly's words lingered in my mind, and as much as I hated to admit it, they made me think. Maybe there was a way to have some closure. Maybe I could finally have the conversation I'd always avoided. "Thanks, Kelly," I said softly. "I'll think about it. But I need time." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, letting the silence settle around me once more. It wasn't the first time I had felt the temptation to give in, to pick up the phone and go back to being the person my family had always expected me to be. But I knew better now. I couldn't go back. Not to them. Not to that version of me. I had chosen myself, and that was the most important thing I had ever done. The next few days passed in a haze. I spent my time working and exploring more of the photography class I had started. Every click of the camera, every new subject I captured, felt like an exploration of my own freedom. But even as I immersed myself in my own life, I couldn't completely block out the pull of my family. The calls, the messages, they kept coming, and though I ignored them, they were a constant reminder of the family I had walked away from. And then one evening, as I sat in my apartment, editing photos, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart pounding. I had known this day would come, but I wasn't prepared for it. I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Victor?" Her voice was soft, almost tentative. "I don't know where to begin, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. You've always been important to me. I know I've made mistakes, and I haven't been the mother I should have been. I've taken you for granted, and I'm sorry." The words felt hollow, distant. I had heard apologies before, but they always felt like band-aids on a much deeper wound. This time, though, I stayed quiet, listening to her as she continued. "I know I can't undo the past, and I'm not asking you to come back," she said, her voice breaking. "But I just need you to know that I love you, Victor. You're my son, and I never should have treated you the way I did." I felt a knot form in my chest, the old feelings of longing and abandonment rushing back to the surface. Part of me wanted to break down, to forgive her, and go back to being the person who was needed, the person who was loved. But another part of me, the part that had fought so hard for independence, refused to let that old version of me resurface. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But I need you to understand that I can't keep being the person who's always there to fix things. I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't see me, for people who only care when they need something." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, trying to hold herself together. "I understand," she said finally. "I'll respect your decision, Victor. But I hope you know that no matter what, I love you." I swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "I love you too, Mom. But I need to go now." I hung up the phone and sat there in the silence, letting it wash over me. The weight of everything, the years of sacrifice, the emotional neglect, the manipulation, it was finally gone. And in its place was something new, something I had never allowed myself to feel before: peace. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love to validate me. I was whole on my own, and that was enough. The next day, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't feel angry, sad, or guilty anymore. I felt free. I grabbed my camera and went out for a walk, capturing the beauty of the world around me. The sun was setting, painting the sky in rich hues of orange and pink. For the first time, I felt like I was living for myself. And that was more than enough. As I clicked the shutter, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I was no longer bound by my family's expectations or my own guilt. I was free to live my life on my terms. And that was the greatest gift I could give myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I had finally found my place. Not in my family's world, but in my own. And that, I knew, was where I truly belonged. Story 2. Growing up, I was taught that wealth wasn't something to strive for, at least, not in the way most people think. My parents ran a small diner, and my mom worked as a teacher's assistant. We weren't rich, but we didn't struggle either. It was a modest, comfortable life, and that's what I thought was enough. My parents instilled in me the value of hard work and humility. They made sure I knew that how much money we had didn't define who we were. I guess that's why, when I unexpectedly inherited my grandfather's vast real estate empire at 25, I kept it a secret. I wanted someone to love me for me, not the balance in my bank account. I kept working as a waitress at Charlie's Diner, the same place I'd worked through college. That's where I met Michael. He came in every morning for his usual coffee and pancakes. He always sat in my section, unlike the other businessmen who barely even looked up from their phones. Michael actually talked to me, remembered the small things about my day, and made me laugh with his bad dad jokes. After a few months of shy smiles and casual conversations, he finally asked me out. He said, "I know this little Italian place. Unless you'd rather be served for a change instead of doing the serving, that dinner changed my life." Michael was everything I'd ever hoped for: kind, funny, and genuinely interested in me, not in my job or my financial status. He told me he was an architect, and while I was happy for him, I wasn't particularly impressed by his success. I loved the man who helped an elderly couple change a flat tire in the rain on our third date. Then came the day I met his family, particularly his mother, Victoria. The Armstrong family was the definition of old money, and Victoria made sure everyone knew it. The first time I visited their mansion, she took one look at me and sneered. "A waitress?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "How quaint." Michael defended me, but her comments only grew worse over time. She made pointed remarks about my background, my limited education, and my career choice. Sure, I had a business degree, but that wasn't good enough for her. Still, I loved Michael, and he loved me. We married in a simple ceremony that Victoria called embarrassingly modest. I didn't care. I was happy, and my secret fortune remained hidden, locked away in various corporations and trusts that my grandfather had set up for me. Things took a turn when Victoria hosted her annual summer gala. She'd been planning it for months, inviting Boston's elite to her mansion to flaunt her wealth and social status. The morning of the party, I got a call from my lawyer with some unexpected news. The deed to Victoria's precious mansion had finally cleared. I'd bought it through one of my shell corporations, and I also owned most of the properties in her exclusive neighborhood. I almost told Michael about my wealth that morning, but something told me to wait. That decision would end up changing everything. When I arrived at the party, I was determined to blend in, wearing a simple but elegant blue dress. But Victoria saw me immediately, and her sharp eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Oh dear," she said with a sneer. "Is that off the rack? How quaint. I suppose it's the best you can do on a waitress's salary." I ignored her, as I'd done countless times before. The party started, and the mansion filled with Boston's wealthiest and most powerful. I recognized many of them not as their waitress, but as their landlord through my real estate holdings. They just didn't know it. Then, during Victoria's speech, the humiliation began. She stood on the grand staircase, champagne in hand, thanking everyone for attending. But when she spotted me trying to stay out of the spotlight, she decided to make me the focal point of her speech. "Oh, and let's not forget our special guest," she said, her voice ringing across the marble foyer. "My son's wife, the waitress. You know, sometimes I think Michael married her just to spite me. What could a successful architect want with a girl who serves pancakes for a living?" The crowd laughed, some nervously, others more comfortably, but no one spoke up. Michael was stuck in traffic, so I was left alone, the target of her cruel words. Victoria went on, clearly drunk on both wine and her own attention. "You'll always be what you are, darling," she continued, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "A worthless waitress, playing dress up in our world." As her words echoed in my ears, I felt the weight of the eyes on me. But instead of succumbing to her cruelty, I smiled, a calm, knowing smile that seemed to unnerve her. "Thank you for your hospitality, Victoria," I said softly. "I'll see myself out." And with that, I walked out of the mansion, my head held high, my heart pounding with a quiet resolve. As I drove to my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer, John. "Remember that renovation clause in the new rental agreement?" I said. "Let's put it into action starting tomorrow morning." I drove home and waited for Michael, knowing that Victoria's perfect world was about to crumble. Tomorrow would bring a surprise that would wipe the smug smile off her face forever. The next morning, as dawn broke, I could hardly sit still. My heart was racing, but there was a sense of calm within me, too. Michael had already left for an important client meeting, completely unaware that today would be the day everything changed. I dressed carefully in a crisp business suit, no more waitress uniform, no more hiding. At exactly 9 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to Victoria's mansion. I sat in my car, watching as my lawyer, John, led a team of contractors and legal representatives to the front door. Victoria answered the door in her silk robe, still looking as though she had just rolled out of bed. Her face twisted in annoyance when she saw them. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded, clearly irritated. John smiled professionally and said, "Miss S. Armstrong, I represent Boston Heritage Properties as your new landlord. We're here to inform you that we'll be beginning extensive renovations on this property, effective immediately." Victoria's face went pale. "What? This is absurd. I own this house. No, Miss S. Armstrong," John replied smoothly, handing her a thick envelope. "As of last month, the property was purchased by my client. According to the agreement your lawyer signed, you're now renting this property, and the renovations will start right away. You'll need to vacate the premises." Victoria's face turned an alarming shade of red as she screeched, "Who dares? This is my house!" That was my cue. I stepped out of the car, walked up the marble steps, and stood before her. She froze as her eyes widened in disbelief. "Hello, Victoria," I said calmly, letting the words hang in the air. Surprise. For a moment, Victoria couldn't speak. "But you're a waitress," she stammered, completely flabbergasted. I smiled, thinking of my grandfather and everything he taught me about business. "I'm many things, Victoria. Yes, I'm a waitress. But I also own this house, most of the properties in this neighborhood, and about 60% of the commercial real estate in downtown Boston." As the contractors began moving in their equipment, I continued, "The renovations will take about 6 months. During this time, you'll need to vacate the premises. Of course, as your landlord, I'm required to offer you alternative accommodation." I handed her a glossy brochure for a modest apartment complex across town. "It's not quite up to your usual standards, but it's the best I could do on such short notice. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to stay with your sister in Connecticut." Victoria looked like she was about to implode. She stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe. "You planned this all along. You were just waiting to humiliate me." "No," I replied firmly, my voice steady. "I kept my wealth secret because I wanted people to know me for who I am, not for what I own. You're the one who chose to judge me, to belittle me, to humiliate me because of my job. And now, well, your world's about to change." Just then, Michael's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, looking confused at the sight before him. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between me and his mother. Victoria wasted no time launching into her hysterical explanation, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Michael, remember what I tried to tell you last night? It's time you knew the truth." With a heavy heart, I sat him down, and for the first time, I told him everything. About my grandfather's inheritance, about how I'd kept it secret because I feared he might love me for my money instead of who I truly was. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he sat there for a moment, absorbing it all. "So, all this time," he finally said, his voice soft, "you were worried I might want you for your money?" I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "I loved you for who you were, Michael. The first wanted to be sure you loved me for me, too." He pulled me into a tight hug, and I could feel the warmth of his arms wrapping around me. I fell in love with a kind, hard-working waitress who always had time to help others and never looked down on anyone. Finding out she's also a secret real estate mogul doesn't change anything. Except, maybe, where we go for vacation, he joked, his voice filled with affection. Just then, Victoria, who had been unusually silent, found her voice. "Michael, can't you see? She deceived us. She made fools of us." Michael turned to his mother, his expression hardening. "No, Mom, you made a fool of yourself. All those times you mocked and belittled my wife, you showed everyone exactly who you are. The only difference is now, they know who she is too." Over the next few weeks, Victoria's perfect world crumbled. The renovation forced her to move into the apartment across town, and her social circle buzzed with the news that the waitress they'd all laughed at was actually their landlord. But the real change came 3 months later, when I was finishing up my usual Saturday morning shift at Charlie's Diner. Yes, I still worked there. It reminded me of who I was and where I came from. It was home. Victoria walked in that morning, but she looked different. There was a humbleness to her, something I'd never seen before. She approached me quietly, her eyes full of regret. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her voice soft, "about who I am and how I treat people. I owe you an apology." I studied her face, searching for any signs of insincerity, but for the first time, I saw genuine remorse. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I make a pretty good cup for a worthless waitress." Victoria flinched at the words, realizing she'd just echoed her own cruel comments back at her. "I deserve that," she said quietly. "I deserve all of this. I miss my son." And I know that means making things right with you first. I poured her a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. You know, Victoria, I began, the renovation clause didn't actually require you to move out. I just wanted you to understand what it feels like having your world turned upside down because of someone else's judgment. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. You mean you could move back into the mansion? I nodded slowly. Once you've learned to treat people with respect, real respect, not just politeness because I'm your landlord, you can. But there's one condition. What's that? She asked, her voice tentative. I smiled. You'll have to learn how to make those pancakes Michael loves so much. For the first time, Victoria smiled back, her eyes showing something close to warmth. I think I can handle that. We started with coffee basics, and she spent the next 6 months working part-time at the diner with me. She learned every employee's name, their stories, their dreams. She learned that worth isn't measured by wealth or status, but by how you treat others. Michael and I moved into a penthouse downtown, but we kept our modest apartment too. I continued working at the diner because it kept me grounded. Every Sunday now, Victoria joins us for brunch. She makes the coffee herself, and while it's not quite as good as mine, no one minds. What matters is that she's finally learned what true respect is. As for me, I'm still that waitress who serves pancakes with a smile. I'm also a wife, a businesswoman, and now, surprisingly, a mother-in-law's teacher in the art of humility. But most importantly, I'm myself, and that's worth more than all the mansions in Boston. Story 3. I sat there, staring at my phone. The screen had cracked slightly when it fell from my hands onto the desk, but I barely noticed. Marcus's voice echoed in my ears, taunting me, savoring his victory. You're so quiet, Diana. I thought you'd make a scene. No begging, no tears. You disappoint me. I couldn't help but smile, an icy smile that had taken months to perfect. No, Marcus, the first said, my voice steady. I'm not disappointed. I just realized the house you gave away to Sarah, your 26-year-old VP, has always been mine. For a moment, there was silence on the line. His usual cocky chuckle faded. I felt a little surge of satisfaction. The beach house wasn't just any property, it was my inheritance, built by my grandfather. It was the place where I'd grown up, the place where I learned everything about love, loss, and self-worth. But now, it was just a pawn in his little affair with someone younger, someone eager to climb her way up. That house was supposed to be a symbol of legacy, but to Marcus, it was just another thing he could claim ownership of. You know, Marcus, I continued, I should go. I have a shareholders meeting tomorrow, something to prepare for. The line crackled with confusion. What shareholders meeting? He demanded. You're not a shareholder. What game are you playing? I could almost picture his face twisting in frustration. Oh, I'm attending the Parker Industries annual meeting tomorrow. See you there, darling. With that, I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free, like I was finally waking up from a nightmare I'd allowed myself to fall into. Marcus had always thought of me as a corporate accessory, someone who could attend company events, smile at the right time, and stay in the background. He never took my work seriously, the consulting business I'd built from the ground up. 5 years ago, when we first met, he saw me as someone beautiful, impressive in my own right, but ultimately, just a pretty face. He would never have guessed how I built my empire. He mocked my career, dismissing it as just a little hobby. And yet, that hobby had allowed me to carefully acquire shares in Parker Industries over the past year. I was slowly gaining control he never noticed. By the time he gave away my beach house, I had quietly positioned myself to strike. 6 months ago, everything changed. I overheard him on the phone with Sarah, planning weekend getaways at my grandfather's house. That was when I started digging. I looked into the finances of Parker Industries and uncovered everything: questionable accounting practices, overinflated projections, and a board too loyal to Marcus's family name to ask any real questions. But I had questions. I had a plan. The beach house wasn't the betrayal. It was just the final straw. I grabbed my phone and dialed Rochelle, my attorney. He did it, I said when she answered. He actually gave the beach house to her. Her typing was audible in the background. Perfect. That's the last piece we needed. The property transfer documents are already flagged for the SEC investigation. How does he sound? Smug, I replied, looking out the window at the Parker Industries building looming across the skyline. The very building Marcus was so proud of. The one he could see from our penthouse apartment every morning, as if it were his legacy. I'm attending the shareholders meeting tomorrow, I continued. And he's not going to know what hit him. Do they know? Rochelle asked, her voice sharp. They will. I've been buying shares through shell companies for the past year. Marcus doesn't even know what's coming. The vote of no confidence is happening tomorrow. Everything's in place. We've got the evidence too, she said, pausing for a moment. The SEC has everything they need. Marcus is going to crash and burn. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the thought. Marcus had never taken me seriously, and now he would regret that mistake for the rest of his life. He thought he had control over everything: his company, his mistress, his life. But he hadn't even noticed me quietly dismantling his empire. The next morning, the cold winter air wrapped around me as I made my way to the Parker Industries headquarters. I arrived early, nodding to the security guards who barely glanced at me, still seeing me as Marcus's wife, the same wife who'd been ignored for years, treated as if my presence at events was a mere formality. Today, that would change. I entered the boardroom, taking my usual seat in the back. Marcus was in his element, shaking hands, smiling, acting like the charming CEO. He didn't notice me at first, his eyes scanning the room, working the crowd as he always did. But then he spotted me, and his smile faltered. The anger in his eyes was undeniable, but there was confusion too. Sarah entered last, her designer dress a little too polished. I recognized it. Marcus had bought it for her with company funds, just one more detail in a long list of things I would expose. Before we begin, Marcus said, standing at the head of the table, I'd like to address some unusual circumstances. My wife seems to think she's involved in today's meeting. His voice had a thin, venomous edge. I stood, my heart steady. Actually, Marcus, I think you're confused. I am the largest shareholder in Parker Industries now. The room went dead silent. The board members shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, their confusion mounting. Marcus sputtered. Flipping through the documents, Rochelle had distributed proof of his affair with Sarah, proof of financial mismanagement, proof of everything. But the most damning evidence of all was the proof of my majority shareholding. He stumbled back. This is impossible. Would you have noticed if you hadn't been too busy buying beach houses for your mistress? I interrupted. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me. The board members reading the documents, their expressions darkening by the second. I moved to the front of the room, every eye following me. I move for a vote of no confidence in Marcus Parker's leadership, I declared, and for his removal as CEO. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but his voice was nothing more than a whisper now. You can't do this. This company is my family's legacy, I corrected him coldly. It was your family's legacy. You've spent the last few years treating it like your personal piggy bank. One by one, the board members raised their hands in support of my motion. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. Marcus had treated me like a fool for years, never once considering that the wife he had underestimated was his biggest threat. When the vote was finished, and Marcus was escorted out by security, Sarah slipped out of the room, her resignation papers likely already on her way to my desk. Why? Marcus asked, his voice almost childlike. I laughed bitterly, because of the beach house. It was the final straw, but it's also about every time you dismissed me, every time you treated me like I was too stupid to understand real business. I paused, savoring the moment. While you were busy playing CEO with your sugar baby, I was building something you couldn't even see. The vote was unanimous. The room erupted in murmurs as I turned to address the remaining board members. Parker Industries will be restructured, I said. My team and I have already drafted a new plan that will restore profitability. We'll start today. You will all be contacted soon. As the board filed out, I sat in Marcus's old office, the one I'd now inherited. It was surreal. My phone buzzed with a message from my real estate attorney. The beach house transfer had been invalidated. Another message followed. The SEC wanted to schedule an interview with Marcus. The final blow had been delivered. I smiled, closing my eyes for a moment. Marcus had underestimated me. But now, as I stared at the skyline, the weight of the building once owned by his family, I knew one thing for sure. The best view comes after the hardest climb. The day after the shareholders meeting, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I reached over and grabbed it, squinting at the screen. It was Marcus, of course. I smiled, but there was no satisfaction left to find in his words anymore. He was starting to put the pieces together. The text read, "You've made your move, but this isn't over." I didn't even bother responding. Let him stew. Let him panic for a while. After all, it was the least he deserved. As I addressed, I couldn't help but reflect on how everything had fallen into place. How the pieces of this carefully constructed plan had fit together so seamlessly. It had all started so innocently, with me picking up bits of information here and there, quietly watching him slip up. At first, I'd thought I'd be the one caught off guard when things started to unravel. But instead, Marcus had walked right into it. His arrogance had been his undoing. I took a long look at the city from the penthouse windows. The Parker Industries building was right there, still towering over everything, just like Marcus always wanted it. That's the thing about ambition, though it has a funny way of blinding people to the realities around them. They think they're in control, but all it takes is a shift in perspective, a little patience, and things can change. I arrived at the office early again. Old habits die hard. But this time, when I walked through the Parker Industries lobby, things were different. The security guard who'd always looked through me, barely acknowledging my presence as I passed, gave me a respectful nod. For the first time, I felt like I belonged here, like I was the one in control now. "Good morning, Miss Chen," the guard said, using my maiden name. "Good morning, Tom," I replied with a smile, heading for the elevator. It felt so natural. It felt right. I couldn't help but wonder how Marcus was spending his morning. He probably woke up in some fancy hotel, wondering what had gone wrong. How had his wife, who he'd always dismissed as just a pretty face, a corporate trophy, pulled off the ultimate corporate takeover? He would never understand. As I stepped off the elevator, I was greeted by my assistant, who handed me a stack of paperwork. "The board members have all confirmed their support for the restructuring plan, and the investors are already on board," she said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Good," I said, settling into the chair behind the massive desk, Marcus's desk, but it didn't feel like his anymore. It was mine now. "Make sure the team is ready. We'll start the transition today." I spent the morning preparing for the real work ahead. There was no more time to dwell on the past, no more time to savor the little victories. Marcus might have thought he was untouchable, but I knew better. I knew how fragile power could be when it was built on lies and manipulation. And now, I was the one who would rebuild. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Rochelle. "The SEC is moving forward with the investigation. They flagged everything from the property transfers to the financial discrepancies. Marcus is going to be facing some serious charges." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. He had it coming, didn't he? I texted back, "Good. Let him learn what happens when you underestimate the people who care about you." Marcus had always treated me like I was nothing more than a tool to help him climb higher. He'd never seen me as an equal. And now, I was the one holding the reins. The fact that I'd funded my share acquisition through my own consulting business, something he'd dismissed as irrelevant, was the ultimate irony. And yet, the truth was undeniable. I'd played the long game, and it had paid off. That evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing the new restructuring plans for Parker Industries, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Marcus. "The first underestimated you, but you won't get away with this." I sighed and set the phone down. It was too late for him to play the victim. Too late for him to think he could still threaten me, to think he could somehow fix things with a few empty words. He'd lost. And not just the company, he'd lost everything that mattered. He'd lost my respect, my trust, and most of all, he'd lost any chance of ever rebuilding what we had. The next few days flew by in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. Rachel kept me updated on the legal developments, and the restructuring plan started to take shape. The board members who had flipped sides were all too happy to keep their heads down, waiting for the storm to pass. But I knew better. The storm wasn't passing, it was just getting started. By the time I sat down to finalize the new business plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. This wasn't just about Parker Industries. This was about proving to myself that I was more than just Marcus's wife, more than just a footnote in his corporate legacy. This was about me finally claiming the respect I'd always deserved. I opened up my laptop and reviewed the numbers one last time. The company would be profitable again, and the plan was sound. But more importantly, I had a plan for Marcus too. One that didn't involve confrontation. One that didn't require me to fight fire with fire. His downfall would be quiet. It would be precise, and it would leave him with nothing. That evening, I took a moment to breathe. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anxious or uncertain. I felt like I was finally on solid ground. Marcus had always believed in the illusion of control. He thought he could manipulate people, play them like pawns. But in the end, it was my quiet strategy, my patience, and my unwavering focus that had brought him down. As I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, I thought about the beach house again, the place that had always been a symbol of my family's history, my legacy. The place that Marcus had thought he could take away from me. It didn't matter anymore. That chapter was over. It wasn't about the house, it was about me. It was about taking back what was mine and stepping into my power. I stood up, walking to the window. The city skyline stretched out before me, and for the first time, I wasn't looking up at it from the outside. I was a part of it now. I had earned this. The next morning, I walked into the office, and things were different again. There was no longer any pretense of my being Marcus's shadow. People looked at me differently now. Respectfully. The same security guard who had once barely acknowledged my presence now nodded at me with genuine recognition. I smiled. "Good morning, Tom." "Good morning, Miss Chen," he said, a slight smile on his face. It felt good, but I wasn't done yet. Marcus would have to face the consequences of his actions. He would have to deal with the SEC, with the media, with the investors who were already whispering about his downfall. But as for me, I had bigger plans now. Plans for Parker Industries. Plans for my future. As I sat down in my new office, the door closed behind me, and I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. I had built this, step by step, quietly and without anyone realizing. I had reclaimed my power, and now I was going to make sure it lasted. Marcus had underestimated me from the start, but now I wasn't just his wife, I was his downfall, and I had no intention of looking back.